Medina Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.
So, as we said, with the diversity of the program, I want to address one of the topic, which is really is talking about innovation and why a company or I would say conglomerates who deal with the healthcare business, it matters for them to talk about innovation and what's this impacts on the healthcare industry itself. So. As we said, we talked about, Dr. Walid talked about operation, excellence in operation. We talked about pharmaceuticals. So let's talk about medical technology a little bit. So what I want to show you is how GE, it has a good tradition of innovation. And I think innovation, it should be at the soul of any big company to sustain. And if you look at it, today GE, it has more 125 years old. And mainly, if you look at it, is in 1879 we start to talk about the carbon filament for the incandescent lamp. It started with GE, and it will continue. If you look at it, even till X-ray tubes, some other innovation in healthcare, in medical healthcare industry. If you look at it at the last one, like in 2009, we're talking about the pocket-size ultrasounds, and which we call it the V-scan, and I'll give you a very small brief about it during my presentation, showing what is this innovation bring to the healthcare industry. So if we need to summarize it in all, we need to think about it that without innovation, I would not think that a big company in the healthcare industry would be able to sustain over 100 years and continue to bring a new, I would say, innovation in the industry years after years and continue to be at the top front of the healthcare industry. Of course, if you want to do innovations, you cannot do it without investing in your research. And if you look at it, at the heart of GE, it was the research centers, which was in New York in 1900. But today, if you look at it, where we have research centers to look at about what innovation we can bring to life, we have in New York, we have in Germany, we have in Bangalore in India, and we have in Shanghai in China. And if you look at it, we spend every year almost $6 billion on doing research and developments, and that employs 2,800 researchers and about 26,000 technologists who are working day and night to develop new products to be put in the market and bring something new to life. Now, if you look at these aspects and look at our region and you start to talk about MILE, compare that one, where those type of leadership move and why we don't have something in our region. And where is the responsibility of the big corporate to be present in such a country like Saudi Arabia. And today, I mean, we have something in Saudi Arabia. And I could tell you this is will be brought to life in 2013, and we have a commitment to spend $1 billion in Saudi Arabia, not only in healthcare but in a different healthcare businesses for GE, and that centers in Dammam. And we started to look at and research about what are the mindset that we think about it in Saudi Arabia, about people, what they think about this. And if you look at it, that there is 87% of the Saudi feels that they would be more successful at innovation through type of partnership like with GE. and around 83%, they believe like small and medium entrepreneurs and individuals can be innovative as good as the big corporation like GE. And I think that is it's very good. And I think Saudi Arabia is well positioned in the Middle East and in the GCC to take the leadership in these developments. And we are keen to develop this, I would say, type of partnership and work on closely to do R&D in Saudi Arabia and bring something to life, I would say, local made. Now, if we look at the innovation and how it's happening in the big corporates, if we think that I would say GE has a good DNA for innovation. If you look at the number of patents that we have it in the today world, we have over 70,000 patents. And it's touching many industry, whether it's healthcare or other type of, I would say, form of biotechnology or biology and some of the other stuff. And this is, as we say, if you don't have this innovation, you're not being able to carry on and compete and continue your life in the healthcare industry. Now, there is one major element that it's on the side of the big corporation, is leveraging different type of industry. Of course, GE, it has the healthcare components, but it has the aviation, it has energy, oil and gas, securities. And if you look at it, all of this type of industry, when we start to conduct R&D and look at innovation, what we can bring new to the markets, this type of fields sometimes cross each other. And this is very important and critical to understand what we can bring, for example, from aviation industry to the healthcare industry or oil and gas. And that's very critical for us to have this open mindset, that to look at what could be innovative and brought into the world of the healthcare industry. Now, if we start to look at what are the companies in the world that classified as the innovative companies on it, and if you look at it, this a published report by Business Week, which is they produce often to look at who is bringing something new to the world. And if you look at it, you could find like Apple, Google, and some other staff on it. And in 2010, it was the first time that we have seen over half of those companies coming not from the US or the European Union. And this is a big change, or I would say, look at a dramatic change where the R&D is shifting and the innovation is shifting to some other places rather than to be on the traditional houses like the US market. And if you look at it also, GE is still on this list far more than 25 years that we bring in more and more type of new, I would say, innovation to the healthcare industry. Now, what we say, if we say we want to qualify the innovation, it could be like, I'm saying innovation, it could be enhancing something, like when we think about Google, and I could tell you how rapidly it moves. Like if you look at Google, I don't know, I mean 10 years back nobody would hear about Google as a search engine or some other stuff, but today it's I would say like the most important search tool that you can use it for the search engines in the internet. It could be like innovative in retrieving something. When we compare that one as like Barnes and Noble and some other stuff, it could be reversing something into opposite, and think about how email started at 25 years or 30 years backward. So what I want to say, innovation, it is something that you bring, and it is something that, or many things that you bring it together to come up and create a value and present a solution for a problem in the market itself, whether it's a healthcare or some other stuff. So I would say innovation would say is everywhere, because innovation isn't one thing, it's more than an attribute that you could come up with. And of course, you need to be innovative, you need to be passionate about something, and you need to be a believer in something. In a sense, I mean, you could have spent or find out a researcher spending 25, 30 years of his life just to conclude and bring something to life. And in many scenarios, they bring it to a good ending, that because they believe it on it. If it's not only driven financially or driven commercially, because behind it, if you think about it, there is a passion, and if they don't have this passion, the continuation, it could not be bringing this to life. So, and one more difference, if you look at it, is in between something which is bringing changes or innovation, is the sustainability and the magnitude of that one. Like when I say I'm bringing something innovative, it has to have the dimension and the implication at worldwide scale, at the same time bringing something that could sustain in the future, and it has an impact on the society. So in terms of healthcare or GE healthcare, so even inside, if you talk about the healthcare industry, the innovation, it's important, because if we look at the IT, and if we look at like molecular diagnostics or molecular imaging, and how it links that with the pharmaceutical industry, and what we are bringing new as the industry as to diagnose patients, this is a way how this parallel thinking on a different component of the healthcare industry will bring it to life. So if we look at the big market, I think we had mentioned earlier in the previous presentation about what's going on at the big pictures. We're moving that we're spending more and more money on the healthcare. We're suffering from the chronic disease, and that's going to continue, and we don't have a sustainable method to deal with the healthcare industry. So what could be the solution as to bring as innovative way, whether it's an IT solutions or it's bringing more therapy or precise therapy or portability or miniaturization of industry like the vScan, or dealing with the productivities and some other tools in the industry. So if you look at the chart, if you look at it in down, which is the dark blue and the light blue, if you see on his life, or heart disease where 50% would die after the first attack, and or brain disorders, and 20% aged of over 75 would suffer from Alzheimer's disease or so on, and a component of that one. So we know that by the ending, that if you have your longer life expectancy, you're going to have suffer from one of these type of chronic disease, and the spending, it will be increasing more and more. So we need to be, I would say, innovative on how to address that one. So the healthcare is shifting from treating, which is the last component you see in this chart, rather than to be predict, diagnose, and inform. So if we're not able really to move to this stage, we're not going to make a big change in the healthcare industry, and it's not going to be ending easy, and there's going to be more pressure on the spending in the healthcare services in the industry. So if you look at this type of innovation, like if you cannot detect, for example, on the upper pictures, what you see is a new way of diagnosing breast cancers. It might not be easy to see it on the normal and traditional way where we see it. So it's very important that we change of thinking on innovative way brought to life. And if you look at the macro trends in the healthcare services and industry, innovations in the clinical and the economical relevance is very critical on this one. What we want is to more industrialize the healthcare services, because we want to repeat it faster, better, and with the more accuracy. And in fact, when they're talking about the Lean Six Sigma process, it fits on this pocket as how much that we can repeat this exercise, how much we can reduce the cost, and how much we are be able to saving lives. Of course, digitization is bringing different dimensions, and today PACS is a reality. 15 years back, when we start to talk about PACS, some people would say, well, you know, this guy is not talking something that is they can realize or do it. It's looked afterward that the electronic medical record in the HIS will be brought in as to life in as a solution and type of industry. So what we say, we're suffering today from the something which we call the emerging era of the chronic disease, and it's going to be continue as the chronic disease. For many reasons, like the aging of the population, the conditions, the life expectancy. And we have more and more restrained in terms of budgeting because we cannot spend more, and because the growth that we see with the GDP is less than the growth in the spending of the healthcare, and that is critical that we shift this mindset. So as we say, we are in the era of the chronic disease. Before we were talking about an era of acute care. Before it was the real infection issues. Today, we have less and less issues with the infection disease care. Although we suffer a lot from when you get to the hospital to having infections, but this is a different dimension of the disease pattern that you see it. But definitely we need to deal with the era of the chronic disease. And if you look at the chronic disease, the most impactful on those type of diseases is the cardiovascular diseases that we see it in the future. Would have cancers, respiratory disease, and diabetes. And diabetes in the future is going to be really impacting the healthcare disease pattern that we see it, with their impacts on other issues. So what we want is to make a shift from dealing with the disease, and rather than to deal with this as disease management approach, which will be enabling to shift the healthcare to better situation. And if you look at the campaign was Nahdi talking about diabetes, this is the way how we want to manage the patient. What we want to manage is a disease management approach rather than to have a sick patient and dealing with the cardiac case or others. And what we want is to have the shift from the hospital to the primary care to the home, and being accessible to the patient at better date. So if you look at the emerging market, and I would like to describe it, why the big company is shifting on this way as an innovation in the traditional business, and why they're moving their R&D to some countries like Saudi Arabia or China or India. So if you look at the 1950s in terms of developing countries and where their sizes in compared to population, China was number one. In 2000 was still China number one. But if you look at it in 2050s, India and China and United States will come on third in positions. And if you look at down on the list, like Pakistan, Indonesia, Nigeria, there will be a huge big country that we need to deal with their patterns of disease. And if you look at what we compare previously to today as emerging markets, before the environment was high, risky, not suitable, but today it's these emerging markets becoming very critical in importance in the future in developing healthcare technology. In terms of size of the population, it becoming like those emerging markets about 50, almost 50%, and their energy consumption is high, so they're becoming important on the landscape of the healthcare patterns. And the growth, and I think this is a very important chart to look at it, like if you see how much the growth you see it in the developing country to developed countries, definitely the growth, and today we are called the healthcare emerging markets. So the growth is in our region, and it's important that we capture that in an innovative way. And this shows very important elements, how big companies is changing their mindset, whether to change the product to be suitable to emerging markets. And if you look at it, where in they comparing the survey and seeing the product features, the sales, the service, how much you can change it to the different markets. And today, if you look at it, it's a big change. Like you could find 30–40% of that one from 10 years backward, where you'd have products coming from the US markets and you just use it. I'm not going to talk about some of those aspects. In the mindset that what we want to shift is more on sustainable health, and that's why we're driving this under an initiative, we call it Healthy Imagination, and the core of it is the innovation in the healthcare industry. Otherwise, we will not be able to compete on that one. So that's why we're bringing to life many products which has the innovation on it, and I want to talk about 2 products and we'll close that. The V-Scan, which is this small ultrasound machine, and this really a revolutionary way of changing the way of thinking how ultrasound machines, it's a pocket size, you could put it in your pocket, and this is now, it's in the market, and their price is very at 1/3 of the ultrasound machine, and it's almost bringing healthcare to anything that you want, even in the remote area. Another product is an ECG machine. This type of machine used to be produced in the US markets, and sell it everywhere. What we ended up is to produce these products in India and sell it to the Chinese market. But after that, we find out that this is also used in the US market. So this is what is in our mind, which we call it the reverse engineering, where you used to produce something in the US and sell it to the world. But today, what we are producing, maybe in the future in Saudi, we might be selling this in USA market. And it's a fraction of the cost of the original price. At least it is 1/3 less of the cost. And that brings something which we call it, you can do an ECG for $1. So our view on dealing with the investments in the healthcare industry is to reduce the cost, and our aim to reduce it by 15%, increase access and increase it by 15%, and improve quality and improve it by 15%. And thank you very much.
Medina Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.